And when I saw the rushes, I was very unhappy with what I had done in the scene.
For decades, Gregory Peck was the picture of dignity, grace, and quiet strength, a man who embodied everything Hollywood's golden age stood for. From To Kill a Mockingbird to Roman Holiday, he was adored not only for his talent but for his reputation as one of the most honorable men in the industry. Peck rarely raised his voice, avoided scandals, and maintained a calm, gentlemanly demeanor that set him apart from the chaos of fame. That's why when whispers began circulating about a bitter feud, one that Peck never publicly discussed, fans were stunned. How could a man known for compassion and integrity harbor such intense dislike for anyone? But behind the polished smile and noble charm, there was a side of Gregory Peck that very few ever saw, a side shaped by loyalty, principle, and a deep sense of betrayal. Hollywood's golden light often hides its shadows, and Peck's career was no exception. He had built lifelong friendships with some of cinema's finest, Audrey Hepburn, Charlton Heston, and Kirk Douglas, yet there was one actor he could never forgive. To this day, those close to him recall moments of tension so thick you could cut them with a knife. What began as a professional disagreement soon turned into a personal grudge that lasted for decades. Peck was a man of restraint, but even he had limits, and when those limits were crossed, the fallout was unforgettable. In this story, we uncover the truth behind the feud that shattered one of Hollywood's most unexpected friendships, and reveal why Gregory Peck, a man loved by millions, truly hated this one person more than anyone else. To understand why Gregory Peck could hold such deep resentment, we first need to understand the man himself, a figure who represented everything honorable about Hollywood's golden age. Born in 1916 in Loyola, California, Peck grew up in modest surroundings, far from the glamour of the silver screen. His rise to stardom was not marked by scandal or shortcuts. It was built on discipline, integrity, and an unwavering belief in the craft of acting. By the time he made his film debut in the early 1940s, Peck had already developed the calm confidence that would define his screen presence. He wasn't the typical movie star, not loud or flamboyant, but commanding through quiet strength. His role as Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird cemented his reputation as Hollywood's moral compass. That performance didn't just win him an Academy Award. It made him a symbol of decency and justice. Both on and off the screen, off camera, Peck was known as humble and respectful, the kind of actor who treated everyone on set equally, from the director to the lighting crew. Colleagues described him as old-fashioned, not in his methods but in his values. He didn't play politics, didn't chase headlines, and refused to participate in the cutthroat side of the industry. His friendships were genuine, his reputation spotless, but even a man as composed as Peck had boundaries. He valued loyalty and honesty above everything else, and he despised arrogance. In an industry filled with egos and rivalry, Peck's patience was often tested. For years, he brushed off gossip and tension, preferring to stay above the drama. But there was one man, one fellow actor, who managed to ignite a frustration in Peck that even he couldn't conceal. The tension between them didn't start with hatred. It began with respect. They had once shared mutual admiration, often crossing paths at award ceremonies and studio meetings. Peck even praised this man publicly, acknowledging his talent and passion. But as time went on, their relationship soured. It started with a disagreement over artistic choices, grew into personal criticism, and finally evolved into a silent feud that spanned years. Hollywood insiders whispered about the growing tension between the two, how Peck, normally calm and controlled, seemed visibly irritated whenever the man's name came up. One producer even recalled an incident during a film negotiation where Peck allegedly refused to work with him, stating bluntly, "I've had my fill of his arrogance." To the public, such behavior seemed out of character for Peck, but to those who knew him well, it was the result of betrayal. Gregory Peck wasn't one to hate easily, but once he felt wronged, forgiveness didn't come quickly. His anger was never loud or explosive. It was quiet, deliberate, and lasting. In the glamorous world of Hollywood, where fame and ego collide daily, clashes were inevitable. But for Gregory Peck, who built his life on principles and restraint, This particular betrayal hit harder than anyone could have expected. It wasn't just about pride, it was about respect, a value he held sacred, and the man who crossed that line. He would go on to become one of the biggest names in cinema, a star as charismatic as he was controversial. Their feud would become one of old Hollywood's best-kept secrets. Hidden behind polite smiles and public charm. As time passed, Peck's quiet disdain never faded. Even as both men aged and their careers took different paths, it wasn't about revenge. For Gregory Peck, it was about never forgetting the moment someone he once admired showed him exactly who they really were. In the glamorous, ego-driven world of classic Hollywood, competition was fierce, but Gregory Peck always managed to stay above the chaos. That is, until he crossed paths with one actor whose charm and confidence came wrapped in arrogance. This was the man who would test Peck's patience, push his boundaries, and ultimately earn his quiet, unwavering disdain. The story began in the 1950s, when both men were at the height of their fame. Peck, already known for his serious and grounded performances, found himself often compared to this rival, a performer equally talented but far more unpredictable. While Peck embodied discipline and depth, the other man thrived on charisma and controversy. Critics loved to pit them against each other, calling one Hollywood's conscience and the other Hollywood's rebel. At first, Gregory admired him. He respected talent even when it came packaged with bravado. They were cast in the same social circles, attending premieres, charity events, and even working briefly on overlapping studio projects. Their interactions were cordial, professional smiles, polite handshakes, and the kind of surface-level friendship common among stars. But that polite exterior began to crack when their creative philosophies clashed. The tension first surfaced during a high-profile studio collaboration. While Peck valued preparation and respect for the director's vision, his co-star believed in improvisation and dominating the spotlight. The two approaches couldn't have been more different. Peck's calm focus was met with arrogance and disregard. "It's not acting," the rival allegedly said behind closed doors. "It's just Gregory playing Gregory again." Those words, whispered across Hollywood, reached Peck, and they cut deep for a man like Gregory, who built his career on professionalism and integrity. The insult wasn't just about ego, it was about honor. He saw acting as an art form, something sacred, while his rival treated it like a game of attention. During one private conversation with a director, Peck reportedly said, "He's talented, yes, but talent without respect is chaos." As time passed, their mutual resentment grew. The rival, notorious for his unpredictable behavior, continued to make headlines for off-screen feuds and romantic scandals. Peck, ever the gentleman, stayed silent in public, but friends noticed his unease whenever that actor's name was mentioned. He simply referred to him as "that man" and changed the subject. The rivalry wasn't just personal. It reflected a clash of eras. Peck represented the traditional Hollywood values of discipline and decency. His rival symbolized the new wave, brash, rebellious, and self-absorbed. They stood on opposite ends of the industry's moral spectrum, and their tension became symbolic of a changing time in Hollywood on one particular film set. When a studio head suggested pairing them again, Peck flatly refused. "I'll work with anyone," he said calmly, "except him." Those who heard it said his tone wasn't angry, it was final. For Gregory Peck, the decision was about preserving his principles, not feeding a feud. Years later, when asked about the actor during an interview, Peck gave a rare glimpse of his feelings. He didn't name names, but his words were telling. "I have respect for many people in this industry. But respect must be earned. Fame alone doesn't grant it." Fans and journalists immediately knew who he meant. In a world where gossip sold more than truth, Gregory never lowered himself to public insults. But the silence, that calm, measured refusal to engage, spoke volumes. Those close to him often said that if Gregory truly disliked someone, you'd never hear him say it outright. You'd simply feel it in the way he avoided their presence, their projects, even their name, and that's exactly what happened. The two men would never work together again, never share a stage, and never reconcile. For Gregory Peck, the chapter was closed, but the bitterness never quite faded while the public saw. Gregory Peck as Hollywood's embodiment of grace and calm. Very few understood the depth of his private feelings toward this one rival. Their clash may have started as professional friction, but over the years it grew into a quiet, simmering resentment, a rare crack in the otherwise composed persona that Peck had cultivated his entire life. As both men's careers continued to soar, the contrast between them became increasingly apparent. Peck maintained a reputation for seriousness, integrity, and selectivity in his roles, often choosing projects with social relevance or artistic depth. Meanwhile, his rival embraced flamboyance, charm, and controversy, often turning the spotlight on himself rather than the craft of acting. The industry noticed the difference, and so did Peck, though Peck rarely spoke publicly about his disdain. Those close to him were aware of it. Friends described how even casual conversations about films or awards would spark subtle but unmistakable signs of irritation. When the rival received accolades or media attention, Peck's response was not loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, controlled exasperation, a clear indication that admiration had been replaced by disapproval. The tension was compounded by repeated clashes over principles. Peck valued respect, preparation, and humility. He believed in collaboration, in lifting others while maintaining one's own dignity. His rival, by contrast, often put ego first, disregarding direction, improvising recklessly, and prioritizing personal gain over collective success. To Peck, this was not just irritating, it was offensive. It challenged everything he believed about professionalism in Hollywood. One notable incident occurred during a charity gala in the 1970s. While Peck arrived punctually, greeted colleagues politely, and participated in the event with sincerity, his rival arrived late, made ostentatious remarks, and appeared to mock aspects of the evening. Observers noted Peck's barely concealed disdain, yet he maintained his usual composure. He said nothing publicly, but insiders knew exactly what he thought. Over the decades, Peck's resentment never softened, though it remained private. Unlike others who might publicly feud or retaliate, Peck handled it with restraint. He avoided collaborations, limited interactions, and simply chose to distance himself entirely. Silence became his tool, a way to preserve dignity while making his feelings unmistakably clear to those who knew him. Interestingly, this quiet resentment had a broader effect on Peck's choices. He became highly selective in accepting roles, consciously avoiding projects that involved the rival or even those associated with him. Colleagues later noted that Peck's discernment was partly influenced by this personal principle. He would not compromise his integrity or comfort for the sake of a paycheck or publicity. Even as both men aged and their careers followed divergent paths, Peck's feelings never fully faded. While he achieved legendary status, accolades, and lasting respect, there was always a shadow cast by that one individual, the man who had once been a colleague, a peer, even a friend, but had become the symbol of everything Peck could not tolerate. In Hollywood, where rivalries are often loud and fleeting, Peck's quiet, decades-long disdain stood out. It wasn't about jealousy, competition, or revenge. It was about principle. Gregory Peck, the very image of gentlemanly composure, had drawn a line, and nothing could make him cross it. This unspoken tension remained one of the most enduring and little-known chapters of his life, proving that even the most reserved and honorable figures can harbor feelings that are deeply human and entirely uncompromising. For decades, Gregory Peck maintained a calm, dignified exterior, even when privately harboring a deep disdain for one of his contemporaries. But in rare interviews toward the end of his life, he finally opened up, not in anger, not in vindication, but in measured reflection, revealing the truth behind a rivalry that had defined one of Hollywood's most fascinating secrets. Peck described his feelings with careful precision. "I've always believed that respect is earned," he said quietly. "Talent alone is not enough. There are some people whose brilliance is overshadowed by ego, and I've never had patience for that." The comment, understated yet piercing, was directed at the man who had challenged his values and tested his tolerance. Repeatedly over decades, the actor explained that his resentment was never about jealousy or petty rivalry. It was about principle. I admired him once, Peck admitted. I thought we could be colleagues, even friends. But over time, his behavior became impossible to ignore. Arrogance, disregard for others, a lack of discipline, these things weigh heavily, even on someone like me. Peck went on to recall specific incidents that solidified his dislike. On film sets, his rival frequently dismissed direction, ignored collaboration, and monopolized attention. At industry events, he flaunted charm in ways that Peck found insincere, even disrespectful. I don't hate often, Peck explained. But when I do, it's because someone has shown me repeatedly exactly who they are, and I refuse to compromise my standards. What made the revelation even more compelling was Peck's honesty about how the rivalry shaped him. Rather than fueling bitterness, it reinforced his commitment to professionalism and integrity. He became even more selective with his roles, focusing on projects that aligned with his values and working with collaborators who shared his dedication. It was a lesson, he reflected. A reminder that maintaining your principles is far more important than pleasing everyone or seeking approval. Peck also revealed the personal toll of carrying this resentment privately. He spoke of sleepless nights spent reflecting on the dynamics, the disappointment of seeing someone he once respected become a source of frustration, and the careful balance required to maintain grace in the public eye. His restraint, he said, was deliberate. I didn't want to make it public. There's no honor in petty feuds, but I needed to acknowledge it for myself. Fans were stunned. Here was Gregory Peck, Hollywood's embodiment of dignity, admitting that he truly hated someone, not in a sensationalized way, but in a deeply human and principled manner. It reminded the world that even the most revered figures have boundaries, standards, and non-negotiable values. In the end, Peck's confession wasn't about scandal or drama. It was about integrity, honesty, and the strength to maintain personal convictions despite public perception. He never sought revenge, never broadcast his feelings for attention, and never allowed the feud to define his legacy. Yet, in speaking the truth, he offered a rare glimpse into the emotional depth behind the man who had once captured hearts worldwide. Hollywood may remember him for his iconic roles, his impeccable charm, and his quiet heroism on and off screen. But those who know the story of his disdain understand another truth. Gregory Peck, for all his grace, was a man of principle who could recognize arrogance. And he never hesitated to protect his standards, even if it meant quietly hating someone more than anyone else.